Good evening. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the second of our talks in this Science and Society series, which we have named Anusandhanena Samaj Vikasa. And, it's my utter, delight, I should say personally, as well as on behalf of the Institute, that Dr. Kakodkar agreed to come and deliver this lecture, and on a topic which is, definitely something that would touch every person, not only amongst the scientists, but amongst people, because this is a threat that, or an issue that we need to contend with, globally, as well as and also, this is where a clear place where scientists would be required to come up with solutions. So let me give a brief introduction to Dr. Anil Kakodkar. I don't think he needs an introduction. So to begin with, he was the Chairman, Atomic Energy Commission and Secretary to the Government of India, Department of Atomic Energy, from 2000 to 2009. 9-year term. I think one of the very well-known people in terms of the kind of leadership he showed in taking the Indian atomic energy program forward. And if you remember, this was also the period where India was also under quite a bit of restrictions from the international community. But many developments happened. He conceptualized and built Dhruva, one of the largest research reactors in the world, and was amongst top individuals responsible for the peaceful nuclear explosion experiments in '74 and the nuclear weapons test in 1998. He also pioneered indigenous development of PHWR, power reactor system, and design of AHWR that would use thorium. He also demonstrated India also demonstrated nuclear submarine power pack technology under his leadership. So he began his career as a mechanical engineering, with a mechanical engineering degree from Bombay University, and Masters in Science in Experimental Stress Analysis from Nottingham in 1969, and then joined the Bhabha Atomic Research Center in '64, securing top rank at the training school, and became the director of BRC in 1996, and as I said, was the chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission and secretary DAE from 2000. After superannuation, he has been active in several aspects of energy, education, and societal development. One of his pet interests is to, kind of find a way to connect the cities to the village-city gap to be closed. The concept for sustainability, bridging the urban-rural divide. And he chairs the Rajiv Gandhi Science and Technology Commission of the Government of Maharashtra, along with many other bodies. I should mention that for me, something that I don't see in the CV is he was, post superannuation, he was the chairman of the governing board of IUCA, my parent institute. And my first interaction with him has been life transforming, because I was asked to, I was actually, there was a worried director who said, look, you're asking for too much money, and, so talk to the chairman of the governing board. And I sat with him and explained to him the idea of what we are trying to do with the LIGO India project. And I still, remark to everyone that it was not a long conversation. I think it took Dr. Kakodkar 10 minutes and 1 or 2 questions to tell me that, this is something that you guys should definitely go forward with. And, the immense support and mentorship I got as with him at the helm of the institute, as you know, in terms of the chairmanship that he had of the governing board, is something that I think made the project happen. I'm forever kind of this is something that it's my life lesson. So it's personally also that way, great delight to have him come here and Raman Research Institute and deliver this talk. I think I took quite a bit of time, but Dr. Kakodkar here.
Well, thank you, Professor Sardeep, and all distinguished colleagues from RRI and around. First of all, let me express both gratitude and happiness to be here and to talk to you. And of course, I have selected something on which I can talk, so it may be a little far away from what you do regularly. But then I suppose if the theme of this series is science and society, then it should be all right. What I intend doing is essentially fill in a few bits and pieces on things which I'm sure all of you already know. I have no intention of going into nitty-gritties of nuclear reactors and the things of that like, but talk in broader terms about the challenge with respect to energy and more particularly role of energy in development, and also now the connection between energy and the climate change crisis that everybody talks about. So we are at crossroads, literally, in the sense climate change threat tells us that we should take all our activities very close to net zero, reduce carbon footprint or carbon emission. And in India, of course, we philosophically, that's a thought which is quite close to our hearts, in the sense, live within your means. There is enough on this Mother Earth for everybody's needs, but not for greeds, and so on and so forth. You can see them across the whole the evolution of Indian thought process. And so one way to say about why are we worried about this crisis? We will live with whatever energy we can make use of and carry on. But then we're also living in this, what one may call, what one may call a connected world. And we're all human beings, the living mortals. So while we are exposed to very robust and profound philosophies, to imagine that everybody will be able to act according to that, when there is always the grass greener on the other side, is a challenge. And so I think this conflict between, on one side, the aspiration that I would like to see India as advanced as any other country in the world. I would like to see India among the most advanced countries of the world. That aspirational thing is a natural thing to happen. And at the same time, we all know the climate change is real. So we have to reduce the carbon footprint. And so we have to derive energy, all energy that we need to support our development, but at the same time also reduce the carbon emission as close to net zero, at least in net emission terms. So that's the challenge, and as I was mentioning, I'm sure everybody is quite aware of this challenge. But I'm not too sure that we are aware of the gravity of this challenge. And that is what I want to communicate through this lecture, and tell you some numbers. And I'm not here to market atomic energy, but it will come out that there's actually no solution without atomic energy. So please don't misunderstand me, but like newspaper, in the headline you write the conclusions first, so let me say this up front. Now, I would attract your attention to this correlation here. This correlation is quite well known, you must have seen across, and of course it's done many times in terms of different parameters, but basically it says that for development process, for human development, you require resources of different kinds. So we are talking about energy. And availability of resources in some ways directly linked to the quality of life you lead. Here I'm plotting that in terms of Human Development Index, which kind of one parameter which picks up, may not be the most comprehensive, but it picks up all dimensions of human development, the quality of life. And so if you have the x-axis here is the energy consumption per person, per capita per year. And the y-axis, as I said, is the Human Development Index. And you can do this by way of different countries in the world, by way of different types of societies. You can do in terms of also different states in India. You can also describe population in different categories, and you will get similar correlation. So as far as the global population is concerned, or the countries are concerned, on this correlation, you can divide these countries in three categories. And that's because when you start making use of energy, at the low level of energy use, it really impacts your quality of life. It goes on up to some point, it's steep rise. On the other hand, there is this, the advanced countries of the world, so they're all on a horizontal line. So in the sense, they get resources. Those resources are very useful in terms of creating values, creating money. It supports their economy, but it doesn't make any difference in terms of quality of life. Because, there is a threshold beyond which, if you have excess resources, it hardly, because the Human Development Index is almost close to 1.95. So there is no way it will go even further. But it contributes to money. You want more energy, you will get more wealth, you can dominate other countries, and so on and so forth. And then in between there is this transition economies who would connect the two lines. Now, So in this way, you divide the countries into, these are the countries which have a very low quality of life and where energy is extremely important in improving the quality of life. You have the middle income countries where they do benefit an average quality of life. So they are also aspiring to go to the higher league. And then you have these advanced countries which are actually enjoying very high quality of life. And you can clearly see a threshold here that if all these countries, they want to be comparable with these countries, they must see an energy access at least up to this point. Now, you can have a variety of philosophies, why do we want this energy and all, but if you put your human needs and include that we are real human beings, so all of us have aspirations, then I think one cannot avoid the conclusion that unless you reach at least up to this point in terms of energy consumption, there is no way India can be in this league. It's as simple as that. Now the question is, how do we are right now somewhere here, Human Development Index of between 0.6 and 0.7, and we want to go there, 0.95, and that would mean this threshold has to be crossed, which is at 2,400 kilogram oil equivalent per year per capita. And I'm talking about in these units because I'm talking about total energy, not just electricity. All energy needs, electricity, heating, and other forms of energy that we need. Now, so obviously, the so-called quote-unquote Vikasit Bharat would be essentially this much threshold per capita energy multiplied by the population of this country whenever we reach that, because our population is still growing. And that's the total energy we should have. Now, today we are consuming something like 6,580, and this is now in terms of terawatt hours per year, but again total energy. But finally I want to come to electricity because as we are going through this energy transition, it is clear that electricity will constitute larger and larger share of our energy use. We can see that happening in our everyday life, whether it is transportation, whether it is industry. For example, industry was using much more coal earlier. Even today they use coal, but they use coal because they require coal as a molecule or to be correct, as an atom. But because while it provides energy, it also participates in chemical reaction. Most of the reductions, whether it's a question of making iron or it's any other processes in other industries, you do use that reductive power of carbon in addition to the energy that it provides. So, but this proportion is for at least all mechanical energy, running of the machines, all of it today has become electrical. Earlier they were used to have a boiler or some diesel engine, but that has come down. So there is this transition towards electricity, and so it's using terawatt hours per year is a more convenient, but we're still talking about total energy. Now, today the total consumption is around 6,580, say 7,000 terawatt hours. But, and also if you recognize that as we move forward, the efficiency in energy use would improve. And that would obviously mean that this 2,400 kilogram oil equivalent per year, that threshold will come down in energy terms because we should be able to do better things with lesser energy. And so now this is all assumption. And by the way, in this entire number, I will be talking about some numbers, but I am not here to defend those numbers in percentage terms. I am not here to defend those numbers in 5 or 10%, but I am here to defend in terms in order of magnitude. And this problem is so clear that you can draw correct conclusions even if you are correct on order of magnitude. Unfortunately, many things around are based on not even that. So that is the point I want to drive together. But then, so now, if we really succeed going forward with higher efficiency, and let's say we can bring down the efficiency from whatever it was to, well, improve the efficiency, or we bring down the consumption from whatever it was to 60%, or the threshold comes down from 2,400 kilogram oil equivalent per year to 1,400 kilogram oil equivalent per year. Even then you multiply that 1,400 into population, as I mentioned earlier, it will end up in total requirement of around 28,000 terawatt hours. So Vikasit Bharat, whenever it happens, you would require that energy, or if you don't get access to that energy, you would be that much short of being Vikasit Bharat. Now the challenge is, how do we bridge this gap? And rightly, there is of course this strong emphasis on renewable energy. Total renewable energy available on Indian landmass, and in renewable energy I include everything, solar, all that is within the definition of renewable energy, plus large hydro, which is kept, which is not in the classical definition of renewable energy, but it is renewable. So you include that also into this. All put together, I think it is not likely to exceed 8,000 terawatt hours per year, which is in a way sufficient to meet the total energy that we use today. And so there is a right emphasis of forward thrust to renewable energy. But we are talking about India reaching the developed nation status. And on that, there is clearly this gap. Renewable energy can take you up to 8,000. So the question is, from where this 20,000 terawatt hours would come? And of all the clean energy sources that you can scan, and you have accounted for renewable energy, the only thing left is for nuclear energy. All others have carbon footprint. You can also talk about using fossil energy, but with the so-called carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration strategies. And I think that will become important. It is inevitable that that will become important because I think this gap bridging is, it looks very doubtful that we will be able to bridge that gap. Although we must try to go as close to that number as. So CCUS and use of carbon, I think will continue in India even beyond the 2070, the target date for net zero for India. Already, for example, in spite of so much of emphasis in renewable energy, our carbon consumption actually is growing. At one stage, it was thought that we will not build any more fossil energy plants. But I think actually there will be additional plants that will get built. It's literally unavoidable. But keep that aside for the time being, because let us talk about how do we reach a Viksit Bharat status with the net zero target fully achieved. Now, translated in, although this I'm talking about total energy, but just to give you a feel of numbers, translated into a power generating unit, if you want to produce 20,000 terawatt hours, you require an installed capacity of a base load generator, nuclear or whatever, but that is something like 2,500 gigawatt electric capacity. Today we are at around 400 gigawatts total. So it's a fairly large capacity that needs to be, and that has to replace the existing non-clean energy source and also provide for the growth. So, so a large share of nuclear in future energy supply is in fact inevitable. So that's the first clear message. Next is, of course, how do you do that? Nuclear energy has been always under embargo. Now, of course, we are somewhat free, not fully free, but somewhat free from those shackles. But still, being dependent on that large quantity of nuclear energy coming from imported technologies is literally going to cost us very dear. But there is this indigenous capability, the technology readiness in nuclear power deployment. We have this pressurized heavy water reactor technology, which I'm sure all of you have heard. This technology for the reactor and of course associated fuel cycle technology is today operating in commercial domain, and operating in a commercial domain with very successful performance comparable with the best global standards. There are 19 such power units, commercial power units, in various capacities, 220 megawatt, 540 megawatt, and 700 megawatt. And 14 more 700 megawatt units are under construction in fleet mode as of now. So I think the domestic technology development is quite mature and ready for deployment at scale. This itself is a large scale, but compared to 2,500 gigawatt, we're talking about a different scale. But I think we have technology ready for deployment at that scale. Now at that scale, we always hear the small and medium reactors and all. There's a big hype. Newspapers are full of that hype. Industry makes that hype. Our politicians also make that hype. And it's important. There are, decentralized solution is always, it has its own merits. And it should be, just like decentralized renewable energy has its merit compared to centralized renewable energy. Same thing is true with large reactors or large power units vis-a-vis small power unit. But if you want to reach a large scale, for example, if I say that I want to reach 500 gigawatt renewable energy target, no way you can achieve it by only decentralized units. On the other hand, if you say that I want to make the most optimum contribution to rural development, I think there is nothing compared to decentralized deployment of renewable energy. So there are these different aspects. So first, I'll come to SMR in a minute, but looking at bridging these large gaps, you require a large power unit, and a 700 megawatt unit, to my mind, constitutes or should constitute the workhorse for rapid capacity addition. On the other hand, the smaller unit, the small and medium reactor which people talk about, by the definition is units up to 300 megawatts are classified as small units. Done, constructed in a modular manner, it makes it small modular reactor. Now recognize that India has been constructing 220 megawatt unit for a long time. We have a large number of, I think, around 15 or 16 220 megawatt units currently operating in India, and some of them have achieved world record in terms of longest uninterrupted continuous operation. No other country has been operating small units. So there are, of course, different rationale for small and medium reactor in different geographies of the world. But rather than drumbeating about small, medium reactors, which the vendors or corporates are kind of making a lot of noise about, why not recognize our own small reactor and see what we can do with it? So I think although we have gone ahead from 220 to 500 to 700, and that will fulfill one objective, the 220 megawatt units are expected to be deployed, and you must have heard in the budget speech this year that they talked about the so-called Bharat small reactor. This are being, it's a discussion going on a fairly intense basis. So, now atomic energy in India by Atomic Energy Act has to be necessarily in government hands. There is a law which says that atomic energy can be handled only by public sector units. Public sector unit defined as where more than 50% ownership is with the, or more than 51% ownership is with the government. Now, and of course, we've been hearing this talk that no, you must privatize anything in public hands or government hands is poor efficiency. Anything in private hands is high efficiency. Now, even if we concede that that is largely true, there is a lot of untrue element there. And I have seen very inefficient private sector units, and I have seen highly, I'm not talking about atomic energy, in general, highly efficient public sector units. So the two are separate issues. What makes industrial unit efficient is a different cup of tea than what is government, what is public. So I think these two arguments should not get mixed up, according to me. But leave aside that whether atomic energy should be privatized or not, the fact today is the hard-to-abate industries, they will find it extremely difficult to export their products if the carbon footprint attached to those products is above a given threshold. For example, you might have heard the carbon border adjustment mechanism, CBAM, which European Union has actually promulgated. And that would require, for example, if you want to export steel, now steel process, making a steel involves carbon. And so it has a footprint. And the threshold footprint is much lower than that. And people are talking about making steel in a manner where you don't involve carbon dioxide emission at all. And there are solutions, there are ways available. They're talking about direct reduction of iron. They're talking about electric furnaces. They're talking about use of hydrogen to reduce the the carbon part of steel or into sort of purer iron or purer steel. So while these developments are going on, the challenge for reducing the footprint of Indian steel, and Indian steel industry has an ambition to become the largest steel producer in the world. They are already one of the largest, close to the top, but they want to be the largest. They have that ambition. But they can't move forward on it unless their carbon footprint is brought down. So I'm giving you the case of the so-called hard-to-abate industries, and they are absolutely desperate about clean energy. So they have come to DAE and Nuclear Power Corporation, and they are saying, look, we want clean energy, we want captive clean power. So here is the money. You set it up on the land that we give you. Only thing is, all the electricity that you produce, we will take away. Which is, I think, a perfect solution for getting finance to capacity addition of nuclear. So this is one, and that's what the so-called Bharat Small Reactor announcement of Finance Minister was about. And so this will grow. Now there are a lot of negotiations to happen. Business negotiations are very hard. And negotiations between a government party and private party are even harder. Because, you know, these are negotiations between parties who don't trust each other. So I think it will, but it will go through because the need is so strong. And then the growth of, you know, so far, whether it is a small reactor or big reactor, we're all talking about uranium reactors. And I'll come to subsequently, but even worldwide, uranium is not as if uranium can provide infinite energy. Its calorific value is large. What million tons of coal can do, maybe several kilograms of uranium can do. So small quantity of uranium can provide large energy, but it's not infinite. And energy is going to be required for all time to come. As long as humanity survives, you will require energy. So thorium, which is not a fissile component, is another equally large source of energy. And in India, we don't have much uranium. So right from beginning, the founder of atomic energy in India, Dr. Bhabha, he did articulate the three-stage program aimed at starting with uranium, because you have to start with uranium. There is no other alternative. There is no other naturally occurring fissile material. So starting from uranium, but going up to thorium. So that is one direction which we have to do, unavoidable. And because the urgency for this transition, uranium to thorium in India, is much higher, simply because we don't have much uranium. We have the, for example, on the second stage, the 500 megawatt PFBR, you must have heard, at Kalpakam. It's very close to commissioning now. The fuel is being loaded. It took a long time, and it became so long that it had probably become a ridicule of people, whether it will happen ever. And energy business is like, even ITER, the fusion problem, I think the same thing is happening, but this business is like that. If you are transiting from the energy transition times, they are usually decades, if not longer. So, but then all that is over. You have this reactor, and I'm sure end of this year or early next year, within that time frame, you will start seeing electricity flowing out of this reactor. So this will take us forward, and then there is the third stage, which will go to thorium. I'll not talk about much about that, but at least conceptually I'll make some mention. So this, so far so good, at least as far as technology is concerned. We may have not done good enough compared to India's needs in terms of deployment of this technology. But in terms of maturing of technology, certainly this is done. Now, what is the immediate challenge? Earlier, when the climate change threat, and it was, nobody visualized that we will need to decarbonize by such and such date and all. In fact, I know earlier when carbon or climate change was being talked about, many people did not even believe. There are, even among the scientific community, there have been papers that this is a hype. So, but then now there is a deadline. And so that broadly that deadline is middle of this century, 2050. All countries cannot do, so for us it's going to be a much bigger challenge even at 2070, but we have committed internationally that India will achieve net zero by 2070. So that leaves, say, 45 years, 46 years. That is the timeline. And that has made all the difference. So we need to achieve all that in that timeline. And so this question of deployment and new technology, all these have to be realized within this timeline. So I think the way of meeting that immediate challenge is once to go very aggressive on deployment of technologies that we have. So that is not so much a technology issue, it is more a business and management issue, finding finance. But that also is a very important challenge. It doesn't happen just like that. For example, you require multiple organizations. One DAE, one NPC is not going to be fulfilling. They can do maybe twice what they are doing today, but they can't do 10 times what they are doing today. That's the kind of difference. So there are those issues there. The second thing is I told you about the issue of uranium, and I'll come to that in a moment. But whatever fuel that you put into the reactor for energy production, the same fuel comes out as spent fuel. And the whole world is worried about the problem of spent fuel because it has high radioactivity, very long half-life. Now that's an argument of the countries which do not believe in recycle. And they don't believe in recycle because they are afraid that that would lead to diversion of weapon usable material. India, we have, like many other countries, for example, France, Russia and others, we actually believe that not recycling is actually leading to an unsustainable kind of nuclear energy development, both from perspective of environment as well as from the perspective of resources. Because if you recycle the same uranium, if you recycle, it will give you 50 times more energy because you make use of the fertile component which is bred to fissile material in a nuclear reactor, and then you separate that and recycle that back, you get much more energy. So, so we are not talking about the spent fuel management issues which the world talks about. The world talks about this as makes a big. That's a problem which we have solved because we have both the reactor technology as well as the fuel recycle technologies running on industrial scale. But the problem is when you run PHWRs, PHWR use natural uranium as against light water reactors. And the natural uranium in PHWR although it is one of the most efficient use of uranium, but in terms of the energy derived per kilogram or per ton of uranium, uh, uranium as it is introduced into the reactor is the least, because it uses light water reactor fuel, you enrich it. And because there is a larger enriched component there, you get more energy from that as fabricated fuel. So the tonnage of fuel that you use in a light water reactor is actually much lower compared to tonnage of fuel that you use in a heavy water reactor, because of that burn-up difference. And that difference is almost a factor of 7. So if you continue with natural uranium, and of course uranium is finite, so that is one constraint, but that constraint is similar whether it is light water reactor or heavy water reactor. But because we must adhere to the closed fuel cycle policy or recycle policy, and if you have natural uranium, you have to deal with much larger quantities of the tons of heavy metal to be recycled. And the cost of recycling is actually determined by tons of heavy metal rather than the fissile content in it. So this is, and when we talk about scaling up PHWRs to a large number, which we must, then we are actually adding a new challenge ahead of us. And that is where I think there is an opportunity for thorium, and I'll talk about that in somewhat more detail. Because with thorium and with slightly enriched, they call it HALEU, high assay low enriched uranium, you can take the burn up of the fuel that goes into heavy water reactor to the same level as it is in the case of light water reactor. So you can bring down the cost involved in recycle to a much lower level. So that I think is something, contain the spent fuel inventory to a manageable size by using thorium, and we'll use that. Second thing is, of course, earlier we had this constraint of our reactors were not able to run at full capacity or high capacity factors because we didn't have uranium. Domestic uranium was in short supply. Now, of course, we are able to import uranium, but from a fuel supply security perspective or energy security perspective, I think it's important that we maximize the use of domestic uranium. Fortunately, we have found more uranium because of the exploration efforts, but it's still low grade, so there is a cost to it. But I champion use of domestic uranium in spite of the high cost, because ultimately, if we are able to use it in the other mode which I mentioned, pay high cost at the front end, and you save the cost at the back end, you will find you are as competitive as the normal fuel cycles. So, but at any time, if let us say 70–80% of our energy production, nuclear energy production, becomes dependent on imported fuel, and some international politics changes, you will find our energy security will be at great threat, and that I think we should avoid. And then, of course, the question of program delivery at the required scale, which I already mentioned about. Now let me come back to how am I doing time? Almost over. So I'll finish in 10 minutes. Is that okay? 10 minutes? Okay. So globally, of course, these numbers are very difficult to bring in any, because it depends on uranium at what cost, and if you are able to pay more price for uranium, you can expand the resource. This is true with any mineral resource. But assuming that the current levels of cost structure and all, the global uranium is around 6 to 8 million tons. That's the resource. In India, what we can manage to get is around 0.3 million tons. But in respect of thorium, global thorium resource is around 6 million tons. These are kind of considered. Actually, the Earth's crust, thorium is supposed to be 3 times larger than uranium, but these are kind of economically viable, extractable resources. But the Indian resources are at least 1 million ton, maybe even more. And the question is, as we are going to future, when energy security will become more and more critical, I think we must, this is another reason why we must leverage on, if we are able to make our energy systems depend or based on thorium, I see India can become as important energy provider, not for India but for the world, as some of these oil producing countries are today. Because in respect of oil, we are so much vulnerably dependent on that. I think we should, the 3-stage goal with which we started, we should realize it as fast as we can. And then if we reach there, then you can imagine that we have almost 1/6 of global resources available here. Of course, we are also 1/6 of global population. So if we say equitable energy use, then of course 1/6 will be required for our own use. But luckily, I think as long as we reach the threshold, and many other countries are using energy which is 3 times, 4 times that threshold, so we will have opportunity to export and we can make that. But in the context of these resources that are available, and the point I was making earlier, that if you have PHWRs based on natural uranium, then even for a 100 gigawatt capacity, mind you, I was talking about around, required or expected number is in thousands of 1,000, 2,000 gigawatts. But even for a 100 gigawatt capacity, you would require 18,000 tons of uranium annually. And if you commit a reactor to a fuel, then you must at least have resource tied up for its life. So you can imagine, multiply by the life of the reactor, which could be 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, and compare that with the global resource available. And you will find that once we reach that kind of level, finding more uranium from international market will be, according to me, very, very difficult. So although uranium in principle, going through, for example, you recycle, go through fast reactors, it can provide you huge amount of energy. But used in this mode, there is going to be a shortage. So there is another reason why we should shift to fast reactors. You can also run PHWRs in what I mentioned, HALEU thorium, so the inventory will come down, but still the basic natural uranium requirement would be similar. So is the case with light water reactors. So with once through fuel cycle, is it really feasible to meet India's requirement? And actually the answer is no. We can probably go maximum to around 50 gigawatts and thereabout, but not more than that. With closed fuel cycle, now these of course closed fuel cycle won't have many meaning because they don't breed. And conversion means you can only get marginally higher. But when you come to fast reactors, then of course this is eminently possible. Even with uranium, we'll get all the energy you require. But by the same token, you can also shift to thorium reactors and you can meet all the energy requirements. And that's the logic of three-stage program. So I think what we are doing is good. It will stand us in good state for some time, but we should quickly change over to the next steps that we already planned for us to meet that requirement. So this was about accelerating use of thorium. This actually requires a different kind of development. You require fuel to be qualified. You require platforms where you can carry out the irradiation of this fuel. These are not there. So I have leveraging some of the startups, their initiative, and then they are in turn connected with several facilities abroad. So I'm entering some process where you should be able to accelerate deployment of thorium in PHWRs for the early phase of that work. And this will help reduce spent fuel inventory, create economic gains, improve performance without any change in the reactor system. And I think with this, we can start nurturing internal. I have not understood. Whenever we talked about, because I was involved in developing international cooperation, but the Indian mindset will be cooperation with United States. Means United States is the supplier of, they are a vendor country, we are a recipient country. I don't understand how we can talk that as a collaboration. Collaboration to me should be among equals. So collaboration to me should be the two countries should collaborate on nuclear technology for a common objective. And I think the common objective here could be, for example, introduce nuclear energy in a big way in emerging economic countries. The threat to climate change is not the Western world, because they have all the capacity to decarbonize. Threat to carbon change, climate change is not the very poor countries who don't have resources to because they are of course emitting carbon dioxide, but they will continue to emit at more or less similar level. The threat to climate change is the emerging economic countries where the economy is growing, so their energy requirement is growing, so there is higher demand for energy. And if that continues with business as usual or the higher footprint, then there is. So that is where nuclear energy deployment should be fastest. So why can't it be a win-win objective for collaboration to do something between India, United States, do something for thorium? And the question, when you talk like that, it looks very atrocious. How can we cooperate with this? How can you do this? I don't understand it. I think India has come to that point. I think we should convince the parties that be, the stakeholders that be, to be able to do that. So while I talked about the use of thorium and accelerating use of thorium to address our recycle issue or spent fuel inventory issue, same thing we can use for the global deployment. And I think this is to my mind, it's an entirely doable issue. We need to, of course, overcome our mindset related problems. And if you want to do that, of course, whatever technologies which are ready for deployable, we should start deploying. But we need to do more. For example, high burn-up capability in PHWR, which I mentioned. But fast reactors we have done, but that is oxide fuel fast reactor. It doesn't multiply as fast as one would like. But you build fast reactors based on metallic fuel, the doubling time can come down from 40-45 years to 8 or 10 years. So it will breed fissile material much faster, so you can make transition. So there is some work going on too, but we should hasten that. Similarly, on the recycle part, most of the, today we do recycle based on the aqueous recycling processes, Purex or whatever. Now, metallic fuel require different form. In fact, it's much more neater way of doing it, pyro processing. And both the fast reactors, metallic fuel fast reactors of the second stage, and the thorium reactors of the third stage, which will be anyway molten salt reactor. So that would be dependent on molten salt technologies. But in terms of the recycled technologies, there are several things common. And the same thing can be used for the thorium uranium fuel that one is talking about. So I think here is another way, as you accelerate these technologies, we can, the hastened deployment of thorium can slowly and effectively merged into the three-stage plan rather than looking at the conventional way. And then, of course, there is this merit in developing high-temperature reactors for direct production of hydrogen through the pyrochemical route. I think I'll skip that because I think I'm talking to the convinced. But if there are doubting Thomases here in the audience, I would advise you to read, it's a recent thing which is moving on the social media. There is a title called Drama Before Data. It's in the context of Chernobyl. In fact, it says about lies of Chernobyl. And you can take a look at that and say how much harm it is done by this disaster syndrome that is projected about Chernobyl and Fukushima and all. So the point I'm making is this is a big barrier to deployment of nuclear energy. And I hope slowly the societies will recognize that most of it is actually based on false perceptions. Similarly, there are barriers related to safety, but then there are technologies which are integral systems which are completely passive. So in fact, for example, the AHWR that we designed at BAR, I had challenged the safety group to find out a scenario which will lead to core heat-up. Configuration was designed in a manner that come what may, whatever happens, core heat-up will not take place. If the core heat-up doesn't take place, there is no question of heating, pressurization, migration of activity, release of activity. All that is not there. And such configurations are possible, and they are possible within existing technologies. So I think we can overcome safety barrier. Waste barrier, I did mention that since we are talking about closed fuel cycle, waste barrier is an issue for countries which have not adopted closed fuel cycle by design. In fact, and all these countries are led by America because their fear of diversion of fissile material for weapons purposes. And then, of course, we have to be able to do that in a cost-competitive manner. That will remain a barrier. But in India, we are doing things at half the cost. The PWRs that we are building, in fact, whenever SMR people come, I said, come and show. In fact, even in civil nuclear cooperation deal, we promised American, they wanted that you give us a share of purchase. I said, okay, take it. How many? They said 10,000 megawatts. I said, given. The only condition is you will do it at the same economic competitiveness as what we do it. Electricity has to be competitive. Electricity buyer, I can't say that because this is nuclear electricity, you pay more. Nobody will pay. You will say it's the same electricity. And you know what is happening to the imported power supplies. So not to worry about that, but we have to maintain cost competitiveness. I'll skip the remaining part and come to the last slide. And that is just to re-emphasize that decarbonization is unavoidable to sustain our very existence. And I think that we all should reconcile. So there is no way that we will say that, look, other countries worry about decarbonization. We have our development, so we'll carry on in our way. We don't have to run as fast as they can. We have to worry about how much money it will cost, what it will mean. All that we should do. We should do it as per our design, our plan, and not be dictated by others. But decarbonization, I think, is important for existence of civilization on this earth. Renewable energy alone cannot support India becoming a developed country. This is actually very clear. Nuclear is the only clean base load energy option available and facilitates a cheaper integration of variable renewable energy. I didn't talk about this. It will take some more time. But suffices to say that, the decentralized renewable energy, for example, cost of solar, that come down to 2 rupees something. But that was with battery support for just 1 hour or short time. And now as the share of renewable energy is going up, people are concerned about the stability of grids. So the recent tender was battery storage or pumped hydro with a capability of 6 to 8 hours. And the bids have jumped up from 2 rupees something to 4 rupees, 6 rupees. In one case, I think 7 rupees. So that is the price of that renewable energy integration. Now, what if, this is because, today it has come to a point where when you come to renewable energy and if renewable energy supply is available, we ask coal to back down. If you ask coal to back down, there is a cost because that becomes a dead investment. So if you see in terms of the electricity consumer, you actually end up paying more. And there are studies, authentic studies, I didn't have time to go through that. But this is an important point. Nuclear is the only clean baseload option available. The baseload is the important key. And it facilitates a cheaper integration of variable renewable energy. Nuclear energy is capable of supporting India's development aspirations. However, development will be capped at a level determined by actual deployment. If you say that we are able to go up to only so much level up, and I deliberately not put those numbers. But let us say you need to reach X, and if you are able to reach X by 2, then rest assured that our development will be capped at that level, regardless of what other people may want to do or something. So we should be very clear on that aspect. And so sooner we scale up nuclear deployment, the better it is. And I stop here and thank you on that note.
Thank you, Dr. Kakodkar, for a very insightful talk. So we have time for a few questions.
So I have a couple of questions actually. First, if we have a fourfold increase in our total energy generation capacity, this is something that you were talking about in your first slide. We are still below the dashed line that you have drawn, actually.
No, we'll reach at that threshold.
Yeah.
That is 6,800 and 28,000
Yeah.
is also roughly fourfold. So we'll reach.
No, but the per capita, by that time,
Yeah.
When that happens, the per capita income, not income, but the population of the country is also going to increase by like a 15% or something.
There
of
is,
that sort.
it will grow up, but it will grow up only marginally. In the sense, of course,
Well,
those numbers
numbers-
vary, but let us say we may go up to 1.5, 1.6, at most 1.7 billion. So, as far as the ballpark numbers are concerned, I think fourfold is still valid.
Okay, and the other thing is, so how fast can we actually deploy nuclear capacity in the country?
That is the million-dollar question. Now, the earlier, the delays used to happen because of technology constraints. Today, I think delays are happening, I don't know what to call it, but we should be, I think you need to organize better deployment strategies, better management, better, in a sense, multiple organizations to deal with this, and so on and so forth.
So
And
is
that's an aspect that I think requires closer attention.
So is that a governance challenge, or is that a social challenge?
Well, it's both. See, all this means huge amount of finance. If you calculate that, this will run in several lakhs of crores. Now the question is, it's unthinkable that all of it can happen by public money, in the sense supported by government budget. Today it is happening partly by government budget, partly by the internal resources of the company. But this has its own limit. There will be a time when we require to mobilize larger capital coming from private resources. And now that because of this the carbon adjustment border mechanism, the discussions in going on, hopefully the two parties come together. But I haven't seen many successful public-private partnership models, although many have been tried. Some are successful, I don't deny that. But there are more failures than successes. So that's a challenge that we need to overcome. Because unless you get a lot of, or the required level of financial resources, there may be an issue. I think there are also administrative issues, management issues, which also are, so this is an area which requires attention.
Again, on this first slide, same. We hear these words like, by 2030 we will become net zero, or 2070 is the target. So is that keeping that 6,000 or 8,000 terawatt hour per year as the target, or the 28,000 as the target?
Very good question. Very perceptive question you are asking. In fact, I must share with you that, and this is my personal judgment, you are free to differ, but good part of our energy planning in the country is based on reports or studies done by others abroad. So, for example, whether there is an organization as prestigious as the International Energy Agency or some other thing, they have been producing reports, energy reports, year after year. And they have been actually producing an India-specific report year after year. And if you look at their projection, you will not find this number. What will be the total energy consumption they are talking about? And we did some reading in between the lines, or churning out these numbers. And we found that at least one of them was based on reaching an energy level or energy consumption which was less than the current energy consumption, which was nicely hidden there. And all kinds of sermons were given. India should do this, we should do this, we should do this on solar energy. And we find people in the policy making level nicely parroting those. So in fact, you will find my having to become so much more vocal for last couple of years, essentially because of this reason. So then in fact, we said, no, this will not do, so let us organize some group. And this requires some modeling, and that capability, today it is better, but it actually did not exist in India for carrying out such modeling. So whatever, we mobilized IIT Bombay colleagues to do that study. Later on, IIM Ahmedabad has done some good study now. So now it is coming out that people have started talking about numbers which are several hundred gigawatts, several hundred gigawatts, or maybe 1,000 to 2,000 gigawatts. But we will never find this in any official documents. These numbers you will not find. And even if you talk to them these numbers, they will make it appear as if they have not listened to this. So I think we need to make our policymakers aware of what is at stake as far as India is concerned. But you actually hit the nail on the head. There are many, many reports where this actually is hidden.
Sir, how is the safety record in general all over the world? Because the reactors are built in the coastal area, and most of the time, sometimes tsunamis, earthquake, and how is the safety record all over the world, the nuclear energy is concerned?
Well, talking about India, India's safety record has been impeccable. In fact, Atomic Energy Regulatory Board, they published their annual report, and it contains all information in terms of whatever events have taken place, whatever have been the radioactive discharges in public domain and all. And can compare them with the best international standards, and they're absolutely clear. There was only one significant accident in that reactor is still running. There was a fire at Narora Atomic Power Station, which was on the turbine side, so it didn't affect the nuclear side. But after that also, a lot of reviews have taken place to make sure. But it was not a nuclear event at all whatsoever. Internationally, the worst accident was Chernobyl. And there were also accidents at 3 Mile Island where there was some release in public domain. And recently there was this Fukushima accident. So that is why I particularly pointed out that publication, Drama Before Data or something like that. It actually tells, see, for example, Chernobyl accident and its effect have been studied scientifically in great detail. There have been a team of doctors, international team of doctors, visiting Chernobyl after 10 years of the accident. And then another visit they made after 20 years of the accident. So there is a huge data available in terms of the radiation effects. And the conclusion, if I had to give you one-line conclusion, is that because of this large-scale displacement of people, sudden displacement from their own habitat, homes, and then restriction, don't drink milk, don't do that, don't do that. The psychosomatic effects of this accident management have been more severe than the radiation effects that they have seen. In terms of fatalities, there were, of course, the firefighters who were quenching that fire. So I think 30, 35 people died in that. But Other than that, because of radiation, very few people have died, in spite of the fact that there are many organizations, including Greenpeace, which, this calculation, if you put this linear no threshold hypothesis and integrate over a large radius, you can show fatalities of any order. So they predicted that Chernobyl has killed 9 lakh people. Absolute false. But Fukushima, which was caused by tsunami, which caused many fatalities, but all out of tsunami, as part of nuclear radiation, zero harm. Zero fatality. There may be some exposure, but again no harm. So the question is, one has to understand this kind of big impact on public mind. And of course we have to remain engaged with public, and that's a matter where howsoever you may put in efforts, which is a good thing, but there will be always a need for more efforts to be put in. That has to be an ongoing exercise. But now that this climate change has become a major issue, the narrative has turned. And in fact, there is a narrative that among the energy producing technologies, nuclear is the safest. So much so, there was a big debate in European Union, European Parliament for that matter. And the question was whether nuclear should be included in the taxonomy for clean energy. And of course, Europe, as you know, Germany is on one side, France is on completely opposite side. So it's a completely divided house. But finally, the Parliament concluded that nuclear would be included in the clean energy technology taxonomy, much the same way as renewable energy or solar energy and wind energy is included. So I think this narrative is changing, but I think there is work to be done. Surely there is work to be done. Yeah.
In terms of safety, there's the other factor which also people talk about is how much of developing nuclear power capability can, kind of allow nuclear arsenal building, right? I mean, is there a connection or is it totally separate compartment and we can completely keep this technology development from the other, or is it at all connected?
In terms of technology, the two are quite different. In the sense, a nuclear reactor, you cannot explode like a nuclear weapon. It will heat up, it may melt down, but it cannot explode. There are some fast reactors whether they were talking about some of these things, but that too, I think a licensed operating fast reactor would invariably one where there cannot be an explosive release of nuclear energy. So the two are quite different. In terms of knowledge, there is proliferation of knowledge leading to such consequences. I believe that is, you cannot say. If society A can do this, I see no reason why society B cannot do this. There may be time difference, one may do earlier than others and all, but you cannot stop it. The thing which is really the challenge that needs to be properly addressed is this question of infrastructure. See, you cannot have a nuclear weapon unless you have weapon usable fissile material. Weapon usable fissile material cannot be produced in a small lab or some 2-3 people with wrong intentions coming together, and this we cannot do. Yeah, you may say that they may steal some material, there may be a sabotage. But even there, I think there have been topics, about that suitcase bomb and that kind of thing. But I think that getting into a real threat is quite a remote thing to happen. So the question is, institutions which have, first of all, to be a builder and provider of nuclear reactor or power technology, or to be a holder, custodian of nuclear weapons technology, you need that infrastructure which allows you to produce fissile material and other materials that are required in the quantities that is required. And those infrastructures are not small. Now, if you have a proper institutional control to make sure that that infrastructure is deployed for only power production, because I think the kind of materials you require here and there, they're different, although some parts of technology may be common. So if there is a proper infrastructure to make sure that this diversion cannot occur, then I think there is no risk. And that is exactly what the IAEA safeguards are about. International Atomic Energy has a safeguard system, and all countries of the world are a part of that safeguard system. And that safeguard system ensures that this diversion cannot take place. Now, since you raised this question, I thought the last aspect that I should also highlight is countries which have adopted the so-called open fuel cycle or not adopted closed fuel cycle for fear of diversion, they will all end up depositing spent fuel in deep geological formations. But 30, 40, 50, 100 years or 200 years down the line, I think the short-lived material will decay out. So what will be left with would in fact be a plutonium mine, because plutonium will remain, all other isotopes. So countries which for fear of diversion or for fear of security issue today are actually creating a huge threat to generations to come in 100 years now. So I have, in fact, soon after my retirement, International Atomic Energy Agency invited me to chair a conference, international conference on spent fuel management. And in the opening session itself, as the chair of the conference, I made a statement saying, look, the open cycle, once through mode of use of nuclear material and disposal of spent fuel as spent fuel is an unresolved issue, and I added, and will remain so as such for all time to come. And there were at least 400 to 500 people from different countries. I thought they will all come down on me with tons of bricks. Nothing happened. A few people quietly in the break congratulated me, but open session all quiet. So that's the situation. So there are fears. I will not discount those fears. But I think one has to see it on balance. And today I think climate change is a much bigger killer than nuclear weapons. I can tell you with some confidence. So I think life will go on like that. You have to weigh different things together.
I want to ask, what is the roadblock for this thorium reactor development? I mean, how long you think may be required to develop this technology?
Well, technology, in the sense, as we consider a technology development in our normal science labs, that technology is already here. In the sense, there is a 30 kilowatt Kamini reactor operating at Kalpakam, which runs entirely on uranium-233. The issue is from the point of view of the so-called commercial power reactors and the technology readiness level for doing so, there is a lot of gap to be bridged. And that gap you have to bridge by doing work not on gram scale, not on kilogram scale, but on ton scale, because that is the kind of quantities involved. And that cannot be perfected without actually doing it. So it's a question of, for example, fast breeder, PABR, prototype fast breeder reactor. It has been a few thousand crore project, big project. Now, and it's a development project. Everybody was kind of little apprehensive what will happen, whether it will deliver. It has delayed so much, costs has gone up. But I'm telling you, on per megawatt, the cost per megawatt term, PABR is still cheaper than many other power plants that we have, including some nuclear. So, but then, if you ask me, are we ready with fast reactor now? I should actually say yes with great confidence, because the 500 megawatt is not a small case. But we have to actually run that reactor for some time, get the experience. You look at PHWR, we built Rajasthan reactor, it had n number of difficulties. It used to be, in media, it used to be a joke. Tarapur tripped, it used to be a headline. The point is, when you build this technology, it takes time to mature. And of course, you can't be sure. If you are lucky, maybe you can show that even first time you can do a perfect thing. For example, the way our nuclear submarine is. It's done first time in the country. It's running extremely well. Now, sorry. So, but by and large, it would take 2-3 projects. So we had problems in Rajasthan, then because of Pokhran, Rajasthan 2 was delayed, Madras Atomic Power Station was delayed. But there were problems in Madras. Then we modified the design, came to Narora. But after 3-4 reactors, it stabilized. So today I'm able to say that this is now technology ready for deployment. I would say the same thing with fast reactors after you will have 1 or 2 more fast reactors. And I'll say the same thing on thorium as you're asking, after we have actually built a couple of power plants. Because, technology readiness level for it to go up, it takes time. And that process, you have to allow investment and time to go through. So that's the long answer to your short question.
Yeah, so it's continuing on thorium versus uranium. Do you see, like maybe you already answered this, but do you see this technology for thorium replacing the existing ones for uranium, or will new plants, nuclear power plants be constructed with the thorium technology?
It's actually both. Like, for example, I told you about thorium halo fuel. Now there one is talking about just replacing this fuel in place of uranium fuel in the same PHWR, no change in the reactor. So that is possible. But if you ask me, is that the reactor for third stage of nuclear power program, which is essentially thorium? I would say no, because here the objective is to somehow advance thorium implementation, because there is a work on the fuel cycle side. But the optimum reactor on pure thorium fuel cycle, I think would be a molten salt reactor. There was a lot of work done in past, then in between it was left, but again it is getting traction. So, so it's both, basically both, but these would evolve. See, fast reactors I told you one, but fast reactor is not one. I myself told you oxide fuel reactors, metal fuel reactors. There are other formats. In Russia they have, so we use sodium cooling. In Russia, of course they have sodium cooled reactors, but they have built a lead cooled reactor, nitride fuel. So, and there are merits of each one of them. So, this technology is an ever evolving exercise. I think you were asking something.
We've seen how Germany, an advanced country, has suffered in the backdrop of Ukraine-Russia war. Is it time that countries, including India, think seriously about energy and link it with climate change? Because there are naysayers also to climate change. Is it really time? Are we running? Our country is running out of time, basically. Thank you.
Well, if you ask me, the answer is yes, and that is why I decided to talk on this subject. We are actually running out of time. See, the point is, I said all this, and we said we must achieve this in, say, next 45 years. The fact is, we are already past 70 years since we started this journey. So I'm not belittling what we have achieved. I'm very proud being a part of that. But to look at from country's perspective, is that enough? And that's, I still believe atomic energy is a success story. But in matters of kind of traveling on this kind of journey, I think we need to improve as a country. There are many things that are required to be done. And as you said, I do believe that time is running out. And that was the main driver for me to talk on this here. Thank you. I think that's a good note to close.
Yes. Okay, let's thank the speaker for nice discussion. So now I'd like to invite our director, Professor Tarun Sauradip, to hand over this memento.
Oh. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so for everyone, dinner has been organized at the library. So you can move there right away.
Predictably, it didn't start raining.